thank you for having me here today. I'm excited to talk about how you can use Twitter in the classroom and beyond. I almost feel a bit silly being here because BET has been trending pretty much every day since it started, so I don't think anyone needs any tips about how to use Twitter, but I will venture to do so. Okay, someone's saying you do need tips. Okay, well, I'll try my best to give you some helpful tips for Twitter for education. But first, I'm just going to start talking about where Twitter is generally in the world, just with some stats. So we have 1 billion tweets sent every 2 days. So 500 million tweets are sent every single day. That just gives you an idea of how much conversation is constantly happening on the platform. And with things like the World Cup and other large world events, you'll see that increase by a lot. We have 284 million global Twitter users, and in the UK we have over 15 million Twitter users. And this one kind of always surprises people that Twitter may seem like a very American-centric company, and even despite my accent, we really aren't. We have over 77% of the use outside of the United States. So when you're really wanting to have a global conversation to connect your classrooms or yourself to other people around the world, Twitter is really the best place to have that global conversation. One that I'll kind of go back to a lot in this quick presentation is that people are constantly on their mobile phones. I mean, here's a perfect example. Everyone's on their iPads, their devices, their phones. People are constantly on the go and accessing Twitter. In the UK, we see this go up to 90% sometimes of people accessing Twitter on their mobile phones. So I think when I talk to a lot of teachers and educators, this is something that they deal with a lot in the classroom. Students are always on their phones, and instead of kind of trying to fight that, you might as well embrace the technology and use it to your benefit. So I'll talk about a few ideas that I've seen around the world and things that maybe you'd like to implement in your own classrooms. And this is one that I think is really interesting, particularly those of you who use Twitter a lot and maybe you don't want to tweet. And I often talk to people and they say, well, I don't want to tweet about my breakfast. No one cares about what I'm doing. Well, you don't have to tweet to use Twitter. Of course, 100% of our users are listeners, but there are 40% of our users who are only listening. So I have a lot of friends in the finance business, and they'll use Twitter just to find out about information. So they use Twitter as kind of like an aggregate news service for them to know about what's happening in the world. So don't think that if you sign up to Twitter, oh, I'm going to have to tweet. In fact, you can follow along with a hashtag like hashtag BetFutures without having to ever tweet anything. And I think this is interesting too, is that 2 and 3 world leaders are on Twitter. Maybe a lot of times you see tweets from celebrities like Katy Perry or Kim Kardashian, but that's not everyone who's on the platform. One of my favorite kind of anecdotes from, I believe it was the Finnish foreign secretary. He tweeted that he was going to be going to Norway, and then the Norwegian foreign secretary tweeted back and said, hey, I'm free on Wednesday between 2 and 3 p.m. Do you want to grab a coffee? And you can see this entire conversation on Twitter in the public sphere about them meeting up to have a political conversation. So now I'm going to talk a bit about kind of educating on Twitter, some case studies that we've seen, maybe give you some ideas about how you can use Twitter for yourself, but then also for your students. Just out of curiosity, how many people in the room are teachers and interacting with students? Okay, so hopefully a bit of what I'll be talking about will be helpful for you. And I just want to go again back to the mobile point, is that the average consumer unlocks their phone 110 times a day. I know this seems like a lot, but I tested it myself the other day. By 11 a.m. I had already unlocked my phone 30 times, so I was easily going to surpass the 110 by the end of the night. So this is kind of helps to frame your thinking that how often people are on their mobile phones. And I would imagine for young people, it's probably more frequent than 110 times. And this is a quote that I think is probably relevant to a lot of people who deal with students, is, oops, I pressed it too soon. The constant challenge of modern relationships, how to prove more interesting than the other smartphone. So I think for people with students, you're constantly battling all these outside distractions that students have, whether it's on their mobile phones or whether it's on a computer. teaching moments. I know sometimes you can think of Twitter as a social networking site only where students will talk to each other and not really get anything else out of it, but there's a lot of really great accounts that you can follow on Twitter to kind of prompt conversations to help educate students. One of the ones that is particularly relevant for those of us in the United Kingdom this year is the general election. So something like the account Bite the Ballot, where a bunch of young people are getting together to encourage other young people to get out and vote on May. So this is a great account to kind of spark interest and talk in young people, even if they're not old enough to vote yet. It's a great way to talk about the general election and how the government works. And here you can see kind of, Ed Miliband is tweeting about it. Bite the Ballot does a lot of amazing YouTube videos where they take questions from Twitter. And so this is a great way to get your students to engage on their phones and maybe tweet Bite the Ballot and have them ask questions directly to someone like Ed Miliband or Nick Clegg. Another few case studies, and I'll just show you this one here, is that Twitter is great for historical Twitter accounts. This one in particular is very interesting, at Real-Time World War II. This is an account that every day will tweet out factual things that happened on that day during World War II. And it's a great way to encourage students to find out a bit more about history and also to spark a conversation during class. So maybe you go and you look at this account one day and you say, today, Winter's View of London, still full of ruins from last year's vicious blitz of bombing. So this is a great way to start a conversation with a visual with students to tell them what happened, why this tweet is relevant, and then kind of expand on the conversations from textbooks. These next two accounts are kind of, I guess, parody accounts of people who are no longer with us. A very popular one is William Shakespeare. This account will tweet out, quotes, sonnets, sometimes funny things that aren't necessarily accurate, but it's a great way for students to kind of have historical figures in a modern environment that they're used to. Another one of my favorite accounts, and this is in no way historically accurate, but the Henry VIII account, it doesn't tweet out anything that's accurate in the sense of actual facts, but he kind of builds a persona around what Henry VIII would have been like. So this tweet reads, "That awkward moment when you introduce your non-male heir-producing wife to the son you had with a mistress." So it is true, like that did happen, but it's not exactly how it happened. So maybe this is a great starting point for you to use in a history class to talk about the relationship with Anne Boleyn. I'm going to go a bit further into some top tips. These are just different examples. I know it's a really, really messy slide, but these are some amazing examples that we've seen kind of around the world that maybe you would be interested in implementing in your own classroom. So the first one is Tweet Pals. This one I really like the idea of is when I was a student, a million years ago it seems, I had a pen pal in Japan. But nowadays you can have a tweet pal. So perhaps you want to do it for a language. If you want to have work with another school in maybe Madrid to sync up two students, one, the English student would tweet in English to the Spanish student, and the Spanish student could tweet back in Spanish, so that each of them would be able to communicate and learn a language through Twitter. This way you're involving what they're already doing, and that's tweeting, and making it relevant to what they're learning in the classroom. Ask questions. This one is particularly interesting for me for people who kind of deal with students who aren't maybe necessarily really confident, who don't want to raise their hand in the classroom. If you were able to have kind of like a board like this in your classroom and have a Twitter timeline open to the hashtag like Ask Mr. G, if your teacher's name is Mr. G, students could tweet with that hashtag asking about a particular subject that you're talking about in class, and then they wouldn't have to have kind of the nerves that come with raising your hand. So it's a good alternative, and maybe you could do that once in a while so that students who don't always raise their hand or participate in class discussions will have a chance to have their voice heard during class. Another one we've seen, and this was I think a high school in Tennessee maybe, but they used 140 summaries. So they used Twitter as a way to summarize books that they were reading, films that they were watching in class, and what it did is it helped them kind of have very clear and concise language about what they were learning in class. Another one that I think Twitter is really important for is breaking news. I remember I was in high school when 9/11 happened, and it was something that a lot of us found really challenging and hard to talk about. But we turned on the TV and we were able to see what was happening and have a discussion about it in the classroom. So using Twitter to look at breaking news, something like what had just happened in Paris, is a great way to kind of highlight it and make it relatable to the students that you have. Another great way to use Twitter is to talk about netiquette. This is a huge issue, I imagine, for a lot of people around bullying, being mean to each other online. So maybe it's a great way to open the conversation about how you're treating each other online and how that shouldn't be any different than you're treating someone in person. Another way is to engage parents. I'll just switch to this next slide really quick, but this is a great example from Memphis, Tennessee. This particular small elementary school uses Twitter as a way to engage with parents. So they'll tweet out homework assignments, they'll tweet out things like the parent university is Tuesday, there's still more space open. So it gives information without having to kind of like bombard parents with emails. And if this was a thing when I was a student, I would have been in so much trouble because I basically never did any of my homework. But if my parents could check a Twitter feed to find out what I needed to be doing, that would have been very beneficial for them. And then finally, engaging in ideas. And I think everyone in this room is probably already doing this because you're at BET and you're on your phones, but following hashtags to make sure that you're following the latest information or following great accounts like @TeachingIdeas to share with each other around the world the things that you're currently working on in your classroom and administration. So this is just briefly what I talked about is resources. This is an example of one hashtag that people use around elementary education. So this is just some quotes from people who've used it. It's that people actually understand what Twitter is used for and what it's about when you're using these hashtags to communicate with each other around the world. Sorry, I'm kind of rushing now. I have 3 minutes. So another tool that we have at Twitter is Vine. This is a fun way to kind of engage with students. You can use it for stop motion infographics. Maybe you want to film a science lab or make a mini film based on a book that you're reading. So this is just an example of a mini science experiment that someone had filmed on Vine. And this is an interesting one from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. They use Twitter and the hashtag, kind of like how we talked about before, to talk about The Wire. So everyone used this particular hashtag and they're able to have a conversation in the classroom live, real time, but also if you're not able to be in the classroom on that day, you can still join in the conversation with your fellow students. This is also great for kind of e-learning and distance learning. If you set a time, we'll be watching The Wire at 8 p.m. GMT. Everyone get online, use the hashtag, whatever it may be, so that you can join the wider conversation. And then finally, I just want to end on this video that maybe some of you have already seen, but I find it really inspirational. This is Brazilian students use Twitter to learn English. It's kind of a fun way to engage with students who are already following these celebrities on Twitter, but a great way to correct their grammar and learn something educational from the likes of Justin Bieber.
I think main point of social media is how fast it is. So by being fast, they're not really worried about their accuracy, they're more worried about the message. We have celebrities that are not really worried about the language. Concerning education, it's really bad because when they see their idol speaking like that, they come to us and say, but this is right, he's American, he's using it. And it's not the case.
Loves it. It's love it.
Teacher is I've never seen. Brazilian with Z.
Heard is with A.
Hi Pink.
Hey Charlie Sheen.
Hi Ian.
Hi Miley. I'm a big Brazilian fan.
My name is Marco.
Felipe.
I'm Alexia from Brazil. I'm 10.
11.
I appreciate your work.
But sorry, it's not lovable, it's lovable.
Hey Charlie Sheen, man, use your brain. B-R-A-I-N, not B-R-A-N-E. careful. I've just seen the world's largest pumpkin. Hugs. Hey Ben Stiller, I'm a big fan and I tried to help you on Twitter.
Awesome.
Hooray!
Yay!
It's possible to have teenagers writing better than native speakers because they are there, they're studying, they want their accuracy.
I am exactly 15 minutes and 29 seconds. So Q&As, tweet me if you have any questions.
Stick to free now.
Okay.